want to tell you something about Lagos. In this city, the most important thing that ever happens to you will not announce itself. It will not arrive with fanfare or warning. It will arrive on a Tuesday morning on a broken BRT bus when you are late for work and your phone is at 3% battery and the woman beside you is eating fried fish at 7 a.m. My name is Zara, and on the morning that changed my life, I was not looking for anything. I was not hoping for anything. I was just trying to get to work on time and not let the city swallow me whole the way it swallows everyone. Eventually, if you are not paying attention, and then one seat opened up and we both reached it at the same time. And that was the beginning of absolutely everything. Stay with me. That morning started like every other morning. I was late. Funke was not late because Funke operates on her own time system that has nothing to do with any clock invented by humanity. I ate standing up. I checked my phone 3 times. I told Funke to lock the door. She said, I left. The bus was already full when it arrived. This did not surprise me. Nothing about Lagos public transport surprises me anymore. I got on because you always get on. You get on and you hold something and you breathe through your mouth and you think about your life choices and then you get off and you do it again the next day. That is Lagos. That is also life. I saw the seat open up at the same moment. My feet started moving toward it. In Lagos, you do not think in these situations. Your body just goes. I was 3 steps away when I realized someone else was also 3 steps away from the other direction. We looked at each other. In Lagos, this situation has 2 possible outcomes. Either someone backs down gracefully, or someone sits down without making eye contact and pretends the other person does not exist. I was prepared for either. What I was not prepared for was what actually happened. He gestured to the seat, just like that. No performance, no waiting for me to thank him. Just sit. I looked at him for a moment longer than necessary, because in this city, when someone does something generous, your first instinct is to figure out what they want from you. He was already looking out the window. He did not want anything. I sat down. 10 minutes later, the bus broke down. Not at a stop. In the middle of the bridge, on a Tuesday morning, in Lagos traffic. I sat there and I looked at my phone, 3% battery, and I looked at the stop traffic in every direction, and I said to myself, Zara, this is fine. This is completely fine. And then the man beside me, the one who gave me the seat, made a sound. Not a complaint, not a hiss, something quieter. I turned to look at him. He was looking out at the traffic with an expression I recognized immediately. The expression of someone who has learned to find something funny in situations that have no business being funny. I said out loud, to nobody in particular, at least we have a view. He looked at me. He looked at the water below the bridge, then back at me, and he said, the view does not help me get to my meeting. I said, no, but it helps everything else. He looked at me for a moment, and then something happened on his face that I did not understand yet. Something small, a door opening just slightly in a place that had been locked for a very long time. We talked for 40 minutes while that bus sat on the bridge, not deeply, not about important things. He asked what I did. I said graphics design. He asked if I liked it. I said I liked it more than I liked the commute. He almost smiled. I asked what he did. He said business. I did not push. In Lagos, business means 100 different things, and none of them are your concern until someone decides they are. I told him about the project I was late for, about the client who kept changing his mind, about the font argument. I will not bore you with the font argument, but it was a significant argument and I was right. He listened. Actually listen, the kind of listening where someone is tracking what you say rather than waiting for their turn to speak. I noticed that not many people listen like that. I did not know what he was thinking. I found out much later. He told me that sitting there, listening to me talk about fonts, actual fonts, was the first time in years he had been in a conversation where he was completely certain the other person had no idea who he was. And that certainty felt like something he had forgotten existed, like oxygen in a room that had been slowly running out. When the bus finally moved again, something shifted. The pocket of conversation we had made for ourselves in the stopped traffic, I could feel it dissolving back into the ordinary noise of the bus. We both went slightly quiet. I looked at my phone. 1% battery. Perfect. My stop came before his. I stood and gathered my bag. I said it was nice meeting you on a broken bus. He said likewise. Simple, clean, the kind of ending that accidental conversations have. I stepped off. I stood there on the pavement for approximately 5 seconds longer than I needed to, watching the bus go. Then I shook my head and walked to work and told myself that was a nice conversation with a stranger on a broken bus, and that is all it was and that is all it ever will be. I was so sure of that. I was completely sure. I had no idea that in this city, on this island, in this industry, Lagos was about to prove me wrong. I have a coffee shop near my office that I go to when I need to think. Not the expensive places on the island, the small one on the side streets where the chairs do not match and the coffee is better than anywhere that costs 3 times as much. I have been going there for 2 years. I thought I was the only one who knew about it. On the Thursday after the broken bus, I walked into my coffee shop and he was there, the man from the bus, sitting at my usual table with my usual order already in front of him, like the universe had decided subtlety was not working and was going to try something more direct. Stay with me. I need to tell you what happened between Tuesday and Thursday because it matters. What happened was nothing. I walked. I argued about the font again. I ate jollof rice at my desk on Wednesday. Ordinary things. But in the middle of ordinary things, I kept thinking about a conversation on a broken bus, which was inconvenient and also ridiculous. And I told myself to stop. I made the mistake of telling Funke. I say mistake because Funke took approximately 4 seconds to decide that I was in love with a stranger from a broken bus and spend the next 40 minutes building our entire future together. I said, Funke, I do not even know his name. She said that is basically the most romantic thing she had ever heard. I went to bed. And then I lay in the dark and I thought I do not even know his name. I thought about the way he listened, about the small thing that happened on his face when I said the view helps everything else, about how he did not try to impress me with anything. He just existed beside me, simply. And then the bus moved. And that was the end of it. I told myself that firmly, the end. I did not know any of this then. But on that Tuesday after the bus, Toby walked into his office and his assistant said 12 people had been waiting for him. He sat in back-to-back meetings until 8 p.m. And in every single gap between meetings, his mind went back to a conversation about fonts on a bridge. He told me this later. He said it was inconvenient. I told him I understood completely. He had been alone by choice for 3 years, not from grief from a decision. Someone he trusted had used his trust as currency, had taken everything he offered genuinely and traded it for things he would never have agreed to give. After that, he had decided people were transactions. Everything was a transaction, and transactions were manageable, people were not. He had been very comfortable with that decision until Thursday morning. I needed coffee and I needed quiet and I needed the mismatched chairs and the woman behind the counter who never asks me how my day is going because she respects that I am a person who is not ready to answer that question. Before 9 a.m., I pushed open the door and I stopped. He was at my table, my exact table, the one by the window with the slightly uneven leg that I always fix with a folded napkin. He had not fixed it with a napkin. His coffee was slightly tilted and he had not noticed because he was writing in an actual notebook with an actual pen like it was 2003. He looked up. We looked at each other. And the first thing I thought was, Lagos is not this small. Something moved across his face that I catalogued carefully and stored away for later examination. It was not just surprise. There was something underneath the surprise that I could not name immediately. I would spend quite a lot of time over the following weeks trying to name it, but that is a later episode. The only other free table was the one directly beside his. I sat down. Mama BC behind the counter was already making my order, black coffee, no sugar, chin on the side because she has been making it for 2 years and we have a system. I sat down and I looked at the table and I said, "You are at my table." He said, "I did not see a name on it." I said, "The tilted leg is my name." He looked at the tilted coffee and he laughed. Quietly, not for anyone else, just for himself. And I thought, there it is again, that thing on his face from the bus, that door opening just slightly. I picked up my coffee when it arrived, and I looked at his notebook, and I said, "Who uses a notebook in 2024? He said, "Someone who does not want what he is thinking to end up in a cloud somewhere." I thought that was either very wise or very paranoid, possibly both. We talked for an hour. I was late for work again. I did not care as much as I should have. He told me he came to this coffee shop twice a week. I told him I came every day. He said, "I have never seen you here." I said, "I have never seen you here either." We both thought about what that meant. Neither of us said it out loud. I stood to leave, and something was different from the bus. On the bus, the ending had been clean. My stop came, and I got off, and that was the structure of it. Here, there was no structure. Here, I was choosing to leave, and I was aware of choosing it in a way I had not been aware of anything in a long time. He said, "I did not get your name on Tuesday." I said, "You did not ask." He said, "I am asking now." I looked at him for a moment and I said, "Zara." He said, "Toby." Simple, clean. 2 names exchanged in a coffee shop on a Thursday morning. And somehow with those 2 words, something that had been accidental became intentional. And intentional is a completely different thing. I walked out onto that side street and the Lagos morning hits me the way it always does, loud and warm and completely indifferent to whatever you are feeling. And I was smiling. I noticed I was smiling. I told myself it was about the coffee. It was not about the coffee. Behind me in that shop, a man was closing his notebook, and he was also doing something his face had not done in 3 years without being surprised by it. He was looking forward to Friday. There is something you need to understand about Lagos Island. The same street where someone is buying pure water from a cart, a man is closing a deal worth more than most countries spend in a year. Wealth and ordinary life exist on top of each other here in a way that is completely unique. I had lived on this island for 2 years, and I had never seen the two worlds collide the way they were about to collide for me. On the Friday after the coffee shop, I found out who Toby really was. Not from him. Lagos told me first. The way Lagos always tells you things loudly, publicly, and at the absolute worst possible moment. Stay with me. He was there on Friday. He had moved from my table to the one beside it, leaving mine free. I noticed this immediately and stored it carefully in the same place I was storing everything about him. I sat down. Mama Bisi brought my coffee without being asked. He was already writing in his notebook. He looked up and said, "Good morning." I said, "You moved." He said, "It seemed fair." I thought about that word, fair. He had thought about Tuesday. That meant something. We talked the way people talk when they are getting used to each other, finding the rhythm of it. He asked about the font argument it had apparently stayed with him, which I found both flattering and slightly concerning. I told him the client had finally agreed I was right. He said, "Was it worth the argument?" I said, "It is always worth the argument when you are right." He looked at me for a moment and said, "I think I would agree with that." Something in how he said it told me he was not just talking about funds. I left the coffee shop at 9 a.m. and walked back toward the office. I passed Malam Sule's newspaper stand the way I always do. My eyes went to the magazines, the way eyes go to things they are not specifically looking for. And then I stopped walking. The cover of Business West Africa. A man in a sharp suit at what looked like an international conference. A headline. And a face I recognized immediately because I had been sitting next to it in a coffee shop 20 minutes earlier talking about fonts. Tobenna Okafor, Nigeria's most private billionaire. I stood at that newspaper stand and I read the headline 3 times. I bought the magazine. I walked to a bench and I sat down and I read the article. Founder and CEO of Okafor Digital Group. Operations across 11 African countries. What? I read the number twice. What more than I would earn in approximately 400 lifetimes. And he had been sitting in a coffee shop on a side street with a notebook and a plain shirt, talking to me about fonts. I sat on that bench for a long time. The article said he was famously private, that he rarely gave interviews, that almost nothing was known about his personal life, that he had built his entire company in 12 years, from a small tech startup in Yaba, where I live, to one of the largest digital media groups in West Africa. He said he was known for making decisions that surprised everyone and being right about them consistently. He said people who worked for him described him as demanding, fair, and impossible to read. And then I found the paragraph that explained the notebook, the plain shirt, the BRT bus, the coffee shop on the side street. The article mentioned briefly, almost in passing, that 3 years ago he had experienced a significant personal betrayal that led him to make significant changes in how he lived his daily life. It gave no details. It did not need to. I already understood. He rode public transport so people would talk to him like a person instead of a resource. He used a notebook so his thoughts lived nowhere that could be accessed. He came to a coffee shop on a side street where nobody knew his name. And he had sat next to me on a broken bus, a woman who had no idea who he was and had a real conversation for the first time in however long. And now I knew, and everything was different, and I did not know what to do with that. I put the magazine in my bag and I went to work and I tried to design things. I was not very successful. I kept thinking about 2 specific questions. First, did he know that I did not know who he was, and was that the point? Second, now that I knew, what was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to treat him differently? Was I supposed to pretend I did not know? Was I supposed to stop going to the coffee shop? And then I made a decision. I decided to do nothing differently. Because whoever he was in that magazine, the person who had sat next to me on a broken bus and listened about fonts and moved tables on Friday, out of fairness, that was also a real person. Maybe the realest version of him that existed. And I was not going to take that from him by suddenly performing awe or calculation or anything else. I was going to keep being exactly who I was and see what happened. On Monday, I arrived first. I sat at my table. I ordered my coffee. And when the door opened and he came in, I looked up the way I would look up at anyone. Not differently. Not with the knowledge of a magazine sitting in my bag. Just, "Good morning, Toby." He sat down. He said, "You are early today." I said, "I had things to think about." He said, "Anything interesting?" I said, "Fonts." He almost smiled. I watched him reading me. He always reads people. I had noticed that by now. He was waiting for something to change, for me to ask him something I had not asked before, for my eyes to go to his watch or his phone or somewhere that would tell him I had done the research. I gave him nothing because I had decided to give him nothing. And slowly, over that cup of coffee, I watched something in his face begin to do something I recognized, begin to rest. Mama BC told me later, much later, that she had known from the Thursday they were both there for the first time. She said, "I see people come and go in this shop for 15 years. I know when 2 people are talking to each other and when 2 people are talking to the version of themselves they want the other person to see. You two, from the first day, you were just talking to each other." I thought about that for a long time. I think she was right. And I think that was the rarest thing either of us had found in a very long time. I need to tell you something about people who have been betrayed deeply. They do not just heal and move on. They build systems, quiet, careful, invisible systems for testing whether the next person is safe. And they run those tests without telling you. Because if you know you are being tested, the test means nothing. On the Wednesday of the 2nd week, Toby ran a test on me. I did not know I was being tested. I did not know until much later. And when I finally understood what he had done and why it changed how I saw everything that came before it, stay with me. He was there before me on Wednesday. Notebook open, coffee already half finished. I sat down. Mama BC brought mine. We talked about the usual things, the morning, the traffic, a story in the news, and then he said something that seemed completely casual. He said, "Have you ever heard of Okafor Digital Group?" I looked at him and I made a decision in approximately half a second. I said, "The tech company. I think I have seen the name somewhere." He said, "What do you know about it?" I said, "Not much. Big company, Lagos Island, I think. Why do you work for them?" He looked at me for a moment, a long moment. Then he said something like that. I felt him reading me. I had felt it before, but never this precisely. He was checking something. I did not know what. I just knew that whatever I said in the next few moments mattered more than it appeared to. So I did the only thing that has ever worked for me in complicated situations. I told the truth. I was allowed to tell and kept quiet about the truth I was not. He asked a second question about 20 minutes later, even more casual than the first, slipped into the middle of a conversation about a completely different thing. He mentioned a specific project, a digital arts initiative that Okafor Digital Group had funded, a big one. The kind of thing a graphics designer in Lagos would know about if she had been paying attention to the industry. He mentioned it like he was making conversation. He was not making conversation. I happened to actually know about that initiative because it had affected freelancers. I knew. I told him what I thought about it, which was complicated. I said the funding was significant and the reach was good, but some of the implementation decisions had not consulted the actual designers on the ground. I said this as a person who had opinions, not as a person who was performing opinions for a billionaire. He went very quiet. He went quiet in a way that felt different from his other quiets. I thought I had said something wrong. I started to soften it. He said, "No, keep going. Tell me what you actually think." So I did. All of it. The things that worked and the things that did not, and the things that could have been done better if someone had actually asked the people it was meant to serve. He listened to every word. He wrote something in his notebook and then he looked up and changed the subject entirely. I did not know what happened on his side of that Wednesday evening. He told me later. He said he went back to his office and sat for a long time. He said what I had told him about the initiative, the honest, unperformed version, was more useful than 3 consultancy reports he had paid significant money for. He said the consultants had told him what they thought he wanted to hear. I had told him what I actually thought because I had no idea I was telling it to him. He had written something in his notebook during our conversation. He showed it to me much later. 4 words, "She does not know." Below that, "And she still said the true thing." That was his test. That was what he was checking. Whether I would tell him what I actually thought about something connected to him without knowing it was connected to him. Whether I was capable of the kind of honesty that does not calculate its audience first. I had passed without knowing there was anything to pass. On Friday, something had shifted. I could feel it before I could describe it. He was the same in every obvious way. Same table, same notebook, same coffee. But the distance, that particular quality of careful managed distance that I had felt from the first day was slightly less, like a window that had been opened 2 inches was now open 4. He asked me how I ended up in Lagos. Not as small talk, as a real question, the kind that wants a real answer. I looked at him for a moment because in 2 weeks he had asked me many things, but always about work, about the city, about external things. This was the first time he asked me something that was about me. I said, I came looking for something better. He said, did you find it? I said, I am still looking. He nodded slowly. He said, me too. Me too. 2 words, but I heard everything inside them. A man who had everything that was supposed to constitute a good life, still looking for something better inside it. Still looking for the thing that the wealth and the buildings and the power could not give him. I thought about that for the rest of the day. I thought about it that night. I thought we are more similar than we look. And that thought was both comforting and terrifying, because similar means something, and something was becoming a word I was using about him more and more. My company sent me to cover a digital art showcase on the island on a Thursday evening. Free event, good for the portfolio, good for meeting people in the industry. My boss said go and represent us well. I put on my best dress, which in my wardrobe means the one without the small stain I have been meaning to treat, and I went. I walked in and I picked up a program from the entrance table, and the first thing I saw on the front page was the logo of the sponsor, Okafor Digital Group. I stood at the entrance holding that program and I thought, Lagos. I thought, of course, stay with me. I told myself it was fine. Big company sponsors many things. He would not be here. This was not the kind of event a billionaire CEO attended personally. I moved through the room and I looked at the work on the walls and I talked to designers I knew, and I was actually having a good time. And then the room shifted the way rooms shift when someone important enters it. I have felt it before, the way a room reorganizes itself around someone powerful. The small adjustments people make without deciding to make them. I tracked the ripple across the room to the entrance. And there he was. Suit tonight, not the plain shirt. The full version of who he was. And he did not look like the man from the coffee shop at all. He looked like exactly what the magazine said he was. His eyes moved across the room, the way they always move, reading everything, and then they stopped on me, and the expression on his face did something I had not seen before. Not the coffee shop version of him surprised, the full version of him surprised, like he had not expected the two worlds to collide here, like he needed a moment to process what that meant. He came across the room. It took him 10 minutes because he was stopped every 4 steps by someone who needed something from him. I watched him move through all of it, gracious, efficient, present enough to be respectful and brief enough to keep moving. And then he was in front of me, and neither of us said anything for a moment. He said, I did not know you would be here. I said, my company sent me. A pause. Then I said, nice suit. He looked at me for a moment, and something in his face relaxed slightly, because I had acknowledged the difference, the suit, the room, who he was here, and then kept talking to him exactly the same way I always had. He said thank you. Then, are you enjoying the showcase? I said I was, until I realized who was paying for it. He almost smiled. He said, is that a problem? I said, I will let you know. People noticed. Of course they noticed. In a Lagos industry room, when the most powerful person in the space spends 20 minutes talking to one person, everyone in the room is calculating who that person is and what it means. I could feel the attention from across the room. I chose to ignore it. I was talking to Toby, not to the room. A woman I knew from another agency appeared at my elbow. She asked very casually, which meant very not casually, how I knew Mr. Okafor. I said we met on a bus. She looked at me like I had said we met on the moon. I said a BRT bus specifically. She looked at Toby, then back at me. Then she said a BRT bus. I said yes. She decided I was being deliberately mysterious and went away to tell people I was being deliberately mysterious. I was not. It was just the truth. He had been watching. He told me later that what he saw was this. Someone had come to ask me who I was to him, and I had answered truthfully we met on a bus and not added anything to it, not implied anything, not used him as a step up. He said most people in that room would have said we are friends or we are close, or would have let the question hang in a way that suggested more. I said we met on a bus because that was true and enough. He said that one sentence was worth more to him than an entire evening. The event ended and I gathered my things and said goodbye to the people I had come to talk to. I was heading for the door when I realized he was heading for the same door at the same time. We walked out together, not planned, not arranged, just the same direction at the same moment. Lagos night outside, the island alive and moving. We stood outside for a moment. The Lagos night was doing what Lagos nights do, loud and beautiful, and completely indifferent to whatever is happening in the lives of the people moving through it. He had loosened his tie. That small thing, the losing tie, made him look like the coffee shop version again. I noticed I was relieved by that. He said the coffee invitation from last week, is it still open? I looked at him. I said, you already come to the same coffee shop as me. He said, I mean somewhere that is not the coffee shop, somewhere I choose because I want to. He said it simply, directly, the way he said everything. And I stood on that pavement in the Lagos night and I thought, here it is, the thing that has been building for 2 weeks in a coffee shop on a side street. Here it is asking me a question. I said yes. He chose the restaurant. I noticed everything about that choice. It was not the most expensive place on the island, and Lagos has plenty of those. It was warm. It had good light. The tables were spaced far enough apart that you could have a real conversation. He had thought about it. He had chosen a place designed for talking, not for being seen. That told me everything I needed to know about what that evening was for. Funke found out about the dinner approximately 11 minutes after I did, because I live with Funke, and Funke has a gift for extracting information from me before I have decided to share it. She sat on my bed and supervised my preparation with the intensity of someone managing a national event. I told her it was just dinner. She told me that nothing is just dinner. I told her to mind her business. She told me which earrings to wear. I wore them. Stay with me. I arrived 5 minutes early because I am always 5 minutes early and I was not going to change that for anyone. I stood outside for 30 seconds and I told myself, you are Zara Mensah from Yaba. You have opinions about phones. You told a billionaire his company's initiative was poorly implemented and he said, keep going, you are fine. Then I went in. He was already there. Not on his phone, just present. the way he was always present in the coffee shop. He had worn the plain shirt again, not the suit. He had chosen to come as the version of himself I had met first. I sat down and I looked at him and I said, "No suit tonight." He said, "I thought you preferred the other version." I said, "I do not have a preference." He said, "Yes, you do." I decided not to argue with that. Something was different from the coffee shop. In the coffee shop, we had always been slightly careful, both of us, managing how much we offered. Here, the care was still there, but slightly less, like the formality of a new friendship giving way to something more honest underneath it. He asked me real questions. I gave him real answers, and he did the same. He told me about growing up in Yaba. I said, "That is where I live now." He said, "I know." There was a pause. Then he said, "I started my company there, in a single room above a pharmacy on Akina Desola Street." I said, "I know that street." He said, "I have not been back in 3 years." I asked why. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because some places hold things you are not ready to pick back up yet." I did not ask what things I had learned by now, that he would tell me what he was ready to tell me, and that pushing would close a door that was only beginning to open. So I said, "I understand that." He looked at me with a specific attention. He said, "Do you?" I said, "I have streets I do not walk down either." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." I thought you might. Later, after the food, and into the kind of conversation that happens when two people have been talking long enough for the polite layer to dissolve, he said something I have thought about many times since. He said, "I stopped expecting people to be genuine about 3 years ago." I said, "What changed 3 years ago?" He said, "Someone I trusted completely used everything I gave them as a tool for something I would never have agreed to." I said, "What kind of tool?" He said, "The kind that money buys." He said it the way he said everything, directly, without decoration. But I heard what was underneath the plain words. Someone had taken everything genuine he offered and monetized it, used his trust as a transaction, and he had decided very quietly, very completely, that genuine was too expensive to offer again, until a broken bus on a Tuesday morning made him question that decision without knowing it was doing so. I said, "I think the people who do that are counting on us deciding everyone is like them. Because if we decide that they win twice, once when they betray us, and once when they make us close ourselves off from everyone who comes after." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "That is the most useful thing anyone has said to me in 3 years. I said, "I have my moments." He almost smiled. He actually smiled. We had been there for 3 hours. I realized this when I noticed the restaurant had largely emptied around us. 3 hours. I told Funke 45 minutes. She was not going to let me leave that down. He looked at his watch and said, "I kept you long." I said, "I stayed. There is a difference." He looked at me when I said that, and something moved across his face that I had started to recognize. The door opening slightly more. Outside, he called his driver. I was about to walk to the bus stop. It was not late. The island was safe. "This is what I do." He said, "I will have my driver take you." I said, "I am fine." He said, "I know you are fine, but the bus at this hour takes 45 minutes and I can have you home in 12. I said that is a very practical argument for something that is not practical. He said practical things can still matter. I got in the car. We did not talk much in the car. We did not need to. The silence was different from any silence we had had before. It was full rather than careful. Like a room after a good conversation, still warm from the words that had been in it. He walked me to the door of my building. He said, "Thank you for the evening." I said, "Thank you for choosing a restaurant I could actually talk in." He said, "I noticed you noticed that." I said, "I noticed everything." He said, "I know. Good night, Zara." I said, "Good night, Toby." And I went inside and stood in the corridor for a moment, and I thought something is happening here. Something real. And real, as I was beginning to remember, is the most terrifying and the most necessary thing there is. Yaba is where Lagos started before Lagos decided to become something else. It is where the university is, where the old bookshops are, where the market women have been selling the same things in the same spot for 20 years. It is also where Tobenna Okafor built his first company in a single room above a pharmacy, and where the thing happened that broke him. He had not been back in 3 years, until a Saturday morning when he called me and said, "Come with me to Yaba." I understood immediately what that meant. Not a casual visit, not an errand. He was choosing to go back to the place he had been avoiding for 3 years, and he was choosing not to go alone. Stay with me. He picked me up from my building, which meant his driver knew where I lived now, which meant something I did not examine too closely. We drove through the city, and I watched him watching Lagos change around us as we moved from the island toward Yaba. His expression, very controlled. The specific control of someone doing something difficult and not wanting to show how difficult it is. He said nothing for most of the drive. I did not feel the silence. I had learned that his silences were not empty, they were working. He was processing something. When we turned onto a street, I recognized I had walked it 100 times. He said quietly, "I used to take this route every morning." I said, "Which building?" He pointed ahead. It was an ordinary building. You would walk past it every day and never look twice. A pharmacy below, a staircase on the side, 3 floors above it. He stood on the pavement and looked up, and I stood beside him, and I did not say anything at all. Sometimes the most important thing you can offer someone is just your presence. Without commentary, he stood there for a long time. And then he told me the full story. Not in pieces the way he had been giving it to me, all of it at once. Like the building gave him permission to finally say the whole thing. Her name was Adana. They had met when the company was 2 years old and still small enough that its future was uncertain. She had believed in it, or so he thought. She had been brilliant, warm, certain the kind of person who makes you feel like the future is already decided and all you have to do is arrive at it. He trusted her completely. He gave her access to everything. His plans, his investors, his strategy, his heart. 2 years into their relationship, she took everything he had shared with her and gave it to a competitor. Not for money, for a partnership deal that made her name in the industry while his company nearly collapsed. She had planned it carefully for a long time. She had been planning while he was trusting. And when he finally understood what had happened, the company survived. He did not. Not the version of him that had believed people were fundamentally good. When he finished, I said nothing for a full minute, because what he had said deserved a full minute of silence before anything else. Then I said, "She did not take your ability to trust. She borrowed it without permission. It still belongs to you." He turned and looked at me. His eyes, something cracking open slightly that had been sealed for 3 years. He said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because you tested me on a Wednesday over coffee, and then you invited me to dinner, and then you brought me here. You have been trusting me in small steps for 3 weeks. It is already happening." He looked back at the building. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Yes, I suppose it is." After the building we walked. He showed me Yaba as he had known it, the bookshop with the owner who remembered him, the booker where the mama said welcome back like no time had passed at all. I watched the neighborhood give him something back. I watched his shoulders drop slightly. I watched him breathe differently than I had ever seen him breathe in a coffee shop or a restaurant or an office building. We ate at the booker, jollof rice and fried plantain and cold Fanta, because that is what you drink at a booker in Yaba on a Saturday, and I was not going to apologize for that to anyone. He ate like someone who had been eating alone at a long table for too long and had forgotten that food with company tastes different from food alone. He said I had forgotten this place existed. I said Yaba did not forget you. He looked at me across the table. He said, "Neither did you." I said, "I only met you 3 weeks ago." He said, "I know. It feels longer." I said, "Yes, it does." Episode 8 is coming. And episode 8 is where Zara's own story finally arrives. Subscribe to Moonlight Tales by Joy. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Like this video, share it, and tell me, what did you feel when he said it feels longer? I read every single one. I told you about Toby's walls. I told you about Adana and the building in Yaba and the 3 years of carefully managed distance. But I have not told you about my walls, and I need to, because this story is not just about a man learning to trust again. It is also about a woman who had convinced herself she did not need anyone and was wrong. Toby asked me one evening, "You said you have streets, you do not walk down." I had hoped he would let that pass. He did not, so I told him. And telling him cost me something I had been holding for a long time. "Still with me?" He asked it simply. No pressure, just "You said you have streets you do not walk down." He left space after it. He had learnt, I think, that I respond better to space than to being pushed. He was right. I looked at my coffee and I said my father left when I was 11. He did not leave dramatically. He just reduced, slowly, until one day he was not there anymore, and we had been so gradual about it that my mother and I had almost not noticed the exact moment he stopped. My mother worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She was a brilliant woman who spent her brilliance keeping us alive and had nothing left for anything else. I learned early that people have a limited amount of presents to give, and the people who are supposed to give you the most will sometimes give you the least. I learned to need very little from people. I became very good at it. I thought it was a skill. I did not understand for a long time that it was a wound pretending to be a skill. 3 years ago, my mother was ill. Not critically, but enough to frighten me. I went to her. I helped as much as I could. And while I was there, I ran into my father on that street. After 9 years, He was living 3 blocks from my mother. 3 blocks. For years he had been 3 blocks away and had not once come to see if we were alright. I stood on that street and I looked at him and I said nothing and he said nothing, and we walked past each other on opposite sides like strangers. And I went back to my mother's house and I decided I would not walk that street again. I had never told anyone that. Not Funke, not anyone. I kept it in the category of things I had processed and filed and did not need to examine again. Toby sat across from me and he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That is not a street you are avoiding. That is a question you are avoiding." I said, "What question?" He said, "Whether people who are supposed to love you can choose to be present and choose not to be." I said, "I already know the answer to that." He said, "Knowing it and accepting it are different things." The following Saturday, he said, "I want to show you something." He drove us to a neighborhood I recognized immediately. I said, "Toby." He said, "You do not have to do anything. We are just walking." I said, "This is my mother's neighborhood." He said, "I know. You told me." I said, "I told you the name of the neighborhood, not the street." He said, "I looked up the street." I said, "You looked up my street." He said, "I did. You once looked up a magazine about me." I thought it was fair. He was right. It was fair. We walked the street. I had not been on it in 3 years, and it looked exactly the same, which was somehow worse and better at the same time. We walked past the spot where I had seen my father. I did not stop. I kept walking. Toby walked beside me and said nothing, just walked beside me. And I thought about what he had done in Yaba when I had stood beside him outside the building and said nothing, just stood there. I understood now what that had cost him and what this was costing me, and that some things you cannot carry alone, no matter how good you have become at carrying things alone. After the walk, we sat down somewhere quiet. I did not feel the way I expected to feel. I expected to feel upset or exposed or raw. I felt lighter, like I had been carrying a bag I had got so used to carrying that I had forgotten it was there, and someone had simply walked beside me while I put it down. He said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Like I walked a street." He said, "Was that all it was?" I said, "No, it was more than that." He said, "Yes, it was." I looked at him and I thought, he came to Yaba because I was there. I walked this street because he was beside me. We have been doing this for each other in small, careful steps, without either of us calling it what it is. And I thought, I am going to have to name it eventually. And that thought was both the most frightening and the most necessary thing I had felt in a very long time. The thing about building something real quietly is that when someone tries to burn it down, they do not come at you loudly. They come at you with something small, a photograph, a caption, a message from someone you trusted who says, "Did you see this?" And suddenly the thing you built carefully in coffee shops and on broken buses and on streets in Yaba is being examined by people who were not there for any of it. Funke showed me on a Wednesday morning. I looked at it for a long time, and then I made a choice that I am not entirely proud of. I chose the oldest response in the world. I chose distance. Stay with me. Her name in the caption stopped me. Adanna. The same name he had told me. The same woman. The photograph was from an industry event 3 weeks ago, before our dinner, before Yaba, before everything. And the caption said, "Back in conversation." I did not know what that meant. I did not ask him. I should have asked him. Instead, I did what I have always done. When I think something is about to hurt me, I made space between myself and the thing before it could. I pulled back, subtly, gradually, the way I had watched my father reduce slowly enough that you almost do not notice the exact moment it begins. And I hated myself a little for that comparison, but it was honest. Toby noticed immediately. He did not say anything for 2 days. He just watched me, the way he always watches people, reading. On Friday, he closed his notebook and looked at me and said, "What happened on Wednesday?" I said nothing. He said, "Zara." I said nothing happened. He said, "You have been smaller since Wednesday." I said, "I am always this size." He said, "You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. I looked at my coffee. I put my phone on the table with the photograph showing. He looked at it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that was taken at an event in March, before the bus, before any of this. I said, "The caption says, 'Back in conversation.'" He said, "The caption is wrong." I said, "How do I know that?" He looked at me. He said, "Because I am telling you." And then he said something that I did not have an answer to. He said, "I could show you proof, dates, messages, everything, but that is not actually what this is about." He said, "You already decided what this was before you showed me the photograph. You had already begun to leave. And I need to know, is that because of what you saw? Or is that because leaving first is what you do when you think something is going to hurt you?" I sat with that for a very long time. He was right. That is the most uncomfortable thing about people who pay close attention. They see you before you have decided what to show them. I had started leaving before I had any real reason to leave. Not because of the photograph, because I had decided it was only a matter of time before I had a reason. And I was preempting the hurt by creating the distance first. My father's lesson, living in me without my permission. I said, "You are right." He said, "I know." I said, "That is very annoying." He almost smiled. I said the photograph frightened me, not because I thought it was true, because it was a reminder that the world outside this coffee shop exists. And the world outside this coffee shop is complicated. He said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Are we going to be able to survive it?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think that depends on whether we decide to face it together or separately." I said, "Together sounds better." He said, "I agree." Episode 10 is the final episode, the last chapter. Subscribe to Moonlight Tales by Joy so you are there for it. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Like this video, share it. And tell me, have you ever started to leave before you had a real reason to? I read every single one. 6 weeks after a broken bus on a bridge, I was standing at the same bus stop. Same morning energy. Same Lagos. Different person standing in it. I did not take the bus that morning. He was coming to pick me up. He has started doing that twice a week. Not because I asked, because he decided to. And the first time I said, "You do not have to," he said, "I know. That is the point." I stopped arguing after that. We had not named it yet, what we were. We had been careful and close and honest and present for 6 weeks, and neither of us had said the word. I had been thinking about that. I think he had too. Today was the day. I could feel it. stay with me. He arrived at exactly the time he said he would. That was one of the things I had learned about him. He was precise about the things that mattered, not rigid, just present for what he said he would be present for. I got in and Lagos morning folded around the car and we moved through the city the way we always move through it now together. He said, I have been thinking about something. I said, that is not unusual for you. He said specifically about us. I looked at him. I said also not unusual. He said, I want to say what this is out loud with words. I said that sounds like a reasonable request from a person who uses a notebook specifically because he does not want things in the cloud. He almost smiled. He said, Zara. I said, yes, Toby. He said, not in the car, in the coffee shop. He wanted to say it there. I understood immediately. The place where it started. The place where the table was left empty for me and the name was asked as a real question. And Mama BC had known from the first Thursday he wanted to say it there. That was the most romantic thing I had ever heard, and I was not going to tell him that. He sat at my table, not his adjacent table. My table, the one with the uneven leg. He sat across from me and he put his notebook down and he looked at me with the direct eyes that had been reading me since a Tuesday morning on a bridge, and he said, I would like to call you mine if you are willing. Not because I need to own something, but because I want to be responsible for something, for your mornings and your front arguments and your walls and your streets, if you will let me. I sat with his words for a moment. Then I said, you want to be responsible for my front arguments. He said specifically and particularly your front arguments. I said that is the most unusual thing anyone has ever offered me. He said I am an unusual person. I said yes, you are. I looked at him. 6 weeks ago he was a stranger on a broken bus. Now he was a man who knew about the street I avoid and the father who reduced and the wound pretending to be a skill. Now he was someone who had come to my table and put his notebook down and asked. I could see Mama BC from the corner of my eye. She had abandoned all pretense of work. She was standing at the counter holding a cloth. She had stopped moving 15 minutes ago. I thought about what she had said from the first day you were just talking to each other, not to the versions you wanted the other person to see, just to each other. I put my hand on his. I said yes. He looked at my hand on his for a moment, then he looked up at me and he smiled, not the small careful smile, not the almost smile, a full, real smile, the kind that reaches everything, that changes the whole face, that you cannot perform or manage or control. Just joy, simple, real, arrived. And somewhere behind us, Mama BC made a sound that was definitely crying and definitely pretending not to be crying. And Lagos went about its business outside as if nothing had happened. And inside one small coffee shop on a side street on Lagos Island, something had. I want to tell you how we got here. A broken BRT bus on a Tuesday morning, a seat that opened up, a 40-minute conversation about nothing important, a coffee shop on a side street where neither of us knew the other came, a notebook, a magazine on a bench, a test I did not know I was taking, a dinner that lasted 3 hours, a street in Yaba, a street in my mother's neighborhood, a photograph that almost ended it before I chose to stay. 6 weeks of small, careful steps taken by two people who had both decided for different reasons that trust was too expensive. We were both wrong about that. Not naively wrong, the kind of wrong that comes from having been right for long enough that it becomes a habit. The kind of wrong that a broken bus on a Tuesday morning can correct if you are paying attention. If you do not take the seat that opens up and assume it is just a seat, sometimes it is just a seat. Sometimes it is the beginning of everything. My name is Zara, and the man who stopped believing in people until I sat next to him on a broken bus is now the person responsible for my front arguments, and I am the person responsible for his. And Lagos loud, vivid, completely indifferent to our feelings, continues outside our coffee shop window every morning. And every morning I sit at a table with an uneven leg and a cup of black coffee and a man with a notebook, and I think this is what I came to Lagos looking for. I just did not know it yet. That is the end of Zara and Toby's story. If it stayed with you, subscribe to Moonlight Tales by Joy for more stories just like this one. New stories every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Like this video if this series meant something to you. Share it with someone who needs to believe that real things still happen. And tell me in the comments what was your favorite moment across all 10 episodes. I read every single one. The next story is already waiting.